Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Places We'll Go show with your hosts, Mark, and of course, myself, Richie. Now, today we have the amazing Paul Kemp-Robertson on the show. Welcome, Paul.
Hello, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here. I'm going to try and put my imposter syndrome in a little box and talk freely and openly with you guys.
Hey, that sounds awesome. But look, many of you will both know Paul and love him for what he's achieved. So let me give you a bit of a deep dive into Paul and a bit of his career. So he's actually the co-founder and chief brand officer at Contagious. And Contagious is an organization that describes themselves as a marketing innovation resource and a creative excellence consultancy for brands and agencies. Now, they were actually recently bought out by Essential PLC. So really looking forward to getting to hear a little bit more about that. Now, Paul is also a published author of a book called The Contagious Commandments, published by the prestigious publisher Penguin Business in 2018. I'm going to quiz you on the book as well, Paul. Now, he's been in numerous publications, including The Guardian and Forbes. He's appeared on CNN, ITV, BBC's Radio 4, and BBC 5 Live Wake Up to Money. So lots of things. And in fact, his is probably one of the big moments in time for Paul was when he did his TED Talk on alternative currencies, which has been viewed over 1 million times. So he really is a shining light in our industry. And we're truly honored to have you on the show, Paul. So welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Really happy to be here. I'm very grateful for the invite, actually. So I was surprised given some of the amazing people you've had previously. So we're looking forward to getting stuck into a good conversation.
Well, Paul, a lot of people say that, and that's a bit of a theme that we choose people who have done amazing things, but are actually relatively humble about it. So anyway, Paul, what's putting a spring in your stride at the moment?
Well, I've actually got a new job. So this is the first time I've actually talked about it openly, but as you alluded to, Contagious was bought by Essential a few months ago, and as of January, I will be the chief content officer for the Lions brands at Essential. So which is means that I oversee content for Contagious still. This is the only job I would ever leave Contagious for, because I still get to be connected. But I sort of oversee all of the content that the Cannes Lions organization pumps out, which includes all their award shows. Obviously, Cannes is the central one, plus WARK as well, which is an amazing resource looking at effectiveness and the power of creativity to drive business transformation and so on. So so that's sort of exciting me, energizing me. I'm sort of 88% excited, 12% absolutely terrified. But so prepping to start that in January.
Oh, fantastic, Paul. Well, many congratulations. That sounds like an amazing next step. I would love to get into the thinking around the role of content and how you've seen content shift over time. Now, clearly, Contagious has been one of those great creative hubs for knowledge. And now you're moving into a bigger remit, with Essential and Cannes Lions and WARK. So tell me a little bit about how you see the role of content playing in this ecosystem today.
Yeah, I mean, I think we started Contagious back in 2004. So there's been a massive sort of evolution. It actually started as a magazine, a DVD, and a website, so that puts it into context. And I think we wanted to be a bit counterintuitive. I mean, the logic behind doing Contagious was that I'd previously been at a company called Shots, which was looking at the best creativity in advertising and craft, really, worldwide. Then I had 6 years at Leo Burnett, sort of running the creative resources function and helping to manage the creative councils and so on. So when we did Contagious, it was this sense of 2004. The industry was going through this massive seismic change and disruption. New technologies were coming in. Things like Facebook and YouTube were bubbling up as businesses. You could suddenly be doing smart things on your mobile for the first time. And we just felt that the industry hadn't really acknowledged the change and disruption and new consumer behaviors coming through. So, the idea for Contagious was to be a sort of navigation guide for the immediate future of the business, just to embrace all this change and make sense of it. And so I took the best bits in my sort of previous 2 jobs. The Shots was looking at, creativity and how that impacts business success and so on. But then being at an agency, they were suddenly looking at the real effectiveness, the strategy, why are clients investing in this and what's the brief, so we could marry the two. And I think it's, for me, like trying to be counterintuitive sometimes with content gets attention, in the sense that the most obvious thing for us to have done at the time would have been to make Contagious a website, literally, a website, because everything was going towards blogs and online. And we just thought, we're this tiny, invisible little brand, punky little startup. We need to be noticed. So we felt that by creating a magazine every quarter and making it really high quality, the whole sort of principle behind Contagious was editorial filter. It's like, there is so much stuff out there. There's so much noise, so much hype, people talking a good game. We will look at 1,000 things and we'll talk to you about less than 100. We will be that filter for you. And we just felt that with the magazine, it was a way of, it was our marketing, literally that was our marketing budget, became our our product essentially, because we wanted to create something that people would be this tangible object that people wouldn't want to throw away, they'd want to spend time with. And it's almost this sense that if you've committed to print, then there's something special about that, because it's so easy to go digital. And we just felt that really was this sort of lever that helped, we spark the success of the business, I think, because people suddenly understood what the brand was all about. It became this object that got passed around. People didn't want to throw it away. And for us, it was like, made content precious. I think also there's in the advertising industry, there is a little bit of people are often thinking, should I be in a different industry? Should I be, if I'm on the creative side, should I be in movies? If I'm, if I'm on the client side, should I be in tech? There's this sort of insecurity that we're in this industry that people either don't understand or denigrate or whatever. And we also find that if you actually put something in print, it's this really special moment that sort of just satisfies the ego a little bit. Or it's like, look, Mom, I'm in this, you don't understand my job, but I'm in this special book thing. But so we've always been very sort of proud of, sort of content having this bigger kind of impact and impetus. But I think when it comes to sort of content now, what we're finding is that 2-track content works the best for us, in the sense that we try and do a standard article, and this could be in the magazine, it could be on our IQ platform, which is like the online intelligence resource that fuels Contagious. And we will do the sort of standard story with all the insights and stuff that we normally wrap around it, but then do an espresso version. So if people want to lean back and sort of really read and absorb and digest, fine. But equally, we know that people are time poor and so on. So we try and sort of get different need states. So it'd be like, right, here is we did the same in the book. So we had espresso chapters. It's like, here's the short, punchy version. Just be really smart on things like pull quotes and, intros or bullet points in the intros, just so people can get like an executive summary of what's what. And finally, I just think there is so much content out there. It's so easy to churn content out now, obviously, because all you need is a laptop, a mobile, whatever, and you can, which is great because it's democratized opinion. It's now not in the hands of, kind of certain rich media owners and so on. So everybody has got an authentic voice. But how the hell do you navigate that? There is so much. So that's why we feel as though content that behaves as a filter, that, we'll say, look, we will look at all this stuff that's out there, give you an opinion, give you an insight, back it up with evidence, and as you say, if you want the long read, go for it. If you want the espresso, but make it good, make it relevant, make it, so there's actionable insights. I think people have got so much alternative things to invest their time in. If they're going to invest time in your content, you have to make it relevant, entertaining, have some sort of like learning journey in there. This one's got to take something away from it and go, thank you, I've invested my time in you and you've delivered something, appreciate it. And then they'll come back.
Love that, Paul. Yeah, the battle for attention.
Yes.
And I mean, the magazine is a beautiful product, and that has endured. You mentioned a little bit about some of the previous influences, but I'd like to rewind all the way to the beginning. And what was the circumstances by which you got into the communication industry?
Right.
The day.
Okay, so I think this is kind of one of those life lessons, isn't it? It's circuitous, and I think people, particularly young people looking at coming into the industry, is like, don't be afraid to have a circuitous journey. You don't think at 18 or 21 or whatever, you've got to have a real distinct sense of what the hell you want to do with your life. Because I grew up in Middlesbrough, the north of England, North Yorkshire. I know it don't sound like it, but I did drama, darling, at university. So I've sort of somehow, I did drama and English at Goldsmiths, and somehow northern accent battered out of me. But so I sort of came from a little, you think of Middlesbrough as a bit of a challenger town. It's a sort of very industrial, northern, slightly beleaguered town that got its sort of industrial soul ripped out by Margaret Thatcher and has never quite recovered. So, you live in the north of England. I had no idea about advertising. I thought advertising was a department. Like if you work at Ford, then you make cars here, and there's a sprocket room and an advertising room, and then a accounts room or whatever. So no idea about the advertising industry whatsoever. But my dad was a sports journalist. He used to cover mainly Middlesbrough Football Club. So I was sort of always interested in writing. I think because of him, I think English was my sort of superpower. I think he used to go away quite a lot, obviously traveling around the country with football. And I remember we sort of moved house, moved schools, and I had this sort of certain period where weekends, sort of quite a lot of time on my own, so I'd sort of develop that imagination, like play games with myself, in terms of, I remember having this rocking horse in the garage and, suddenly became a cowboy or whatever it was, so I think I sort of had a very vivid imagination, got into music, was a very bad singer-songwriter with a sort of band at school called The Kick. So I was always kind of, creatively driven, but mainly around writing. I used to get really moved by lyrics of people like, Ian Curtis at Joy Division and all that sort of stuff. So I knew that whatever I wanted to do, it was going to be arts-based and it was going to be writer-based. So I did drama and English at Goldsmiths, desperate to be in London, from being in a small town in Yorkshire, suddenly being the glamorous big city. And then, you sort of come out of, I was Rishi Sunak's worst nightmare. You come out of a relatively, bog standard university with an arts degree. What the hell do you do? So I was just in that situation of applying for, I mean, you remember the olden days where The Guardian had a media section on a Thursday, whatever, where that's where all the media jobs were. And I wrote probably about 400 job applications and got absolutely nothing. And then this is how life works. So sometimes you just got to be open to sort of serendipity and those weird little sliding door things that my girlfriend, now my wife, but one of her friends was on maternity leave and just sort of called up and said, oh, look, I'm about to go on maternity leave. And she worked at this corporate communications company in Marlow that made sort of corporate videos for big brands and so on, training videos. And they needed someone to sort of step in. And she was a secretary, but I was like, oh, well, any researcher jobs or runner jobs or anything, I could do. And she said, oh, well, I'll introduce you to the producer. We're always looking for freelancers. And it just happened that the producer of the team went to Goldsmiths. So that's like that magic kind of unlock in the interview. And that kind of breaks the ice and so on. Long story short, I've got this sort of freelance contract to do various things there. And on the last week, it's one of these things when you used to look at sort of sliding doors. I really enjoyed it. I was doing this fake radio show with Chris Tarrant for people that worked at SO service stations that was going to be distributed as a Christmas cassette. And I was loving this job. I was like, I could work here. This is great. And then suddenly my sort of big boss was fired for having an affair with his secretary, using his expense account to fund it. And they lost an account as well. And they were like, oh, there's no way we can give you a job now. Yeah. So literally following week, I was going to be unemployed. And I was driving on my last day to the shoots that we were doing in these factories and farms around Buckinghamshire with this older production manager freelance who was moaning driving down the M40 that she had 3 jobs on her answer machine last night and didn't know which one to take. And I'm like, I'm literally going to be unemployed next week. So I'd sort of printed these little business cards at WH Smith. And I sort of said, look, if ever you're on anything and they need a runner, researcher, anybody, I'm sort of, desperate to sort of come and work. And just by sheer coincidence, that weekend, she was coming out of a restaurant in Notting Hill as my now partner on Contagious was walking in. And they used to work with each other 7 years previously at Thames Television, hadn't seen each other for 7 years. And she was, oh, what are you up to? And, you're still at Thames? He goes, no, I've got this new thing. And he basically had created this company called Shots, which was this videotape and magazine looking at the world's best advertising. He said, oh, do you need any staff? And he's like, and he said, well, yeah, we're recruiting at the moment. So she said, oh, I know this young lad, and can I give him your number and so on? So basically, I got the phone number, called him up, and he said, yeah, I won't do the interview. I'm on the creative side. It's my partner who's doing the business partner's doing the interviews. Come the next day for an interview. So I rocked up at they're in this little tiny studio in a big building in West London. And the guy that was supposed to be interviewing me had forgotten. So I'm literally sitting, waiting in reception. There's no mobiles at that point. So the receptionist is going, well, then no one's answering in their little office, and I don't know what's going on. So you're welcome to wait. So I thought, well, okay, half an hour. And then it's, well, maybe I got the time wrong. And it had got to about 55 minutes, and I was going to go on the hour. And Guy, the guy who I'd spoken to, basically had forgotten something and left it on his desk, came back into the office to get it. And the receptionist was saying, oh, this lad been waiting for Will for an hour. And he came up, was so embarrassed, and said, oh, look, I'm really sorry. I've got no idea what Will's up to, where he is. Let me, let's do an impromptu interview. There's a brasserie next door. Let me take you in there. So we sat down, and he said, right, okay, tell me about your work experience. I'm like, well, I've done a bit of market research, mystery shopper, then I worked for this corporate company. I haven't done much because my girlfriend and I went traveling around Thailand for 2 months after uni. And he's like, Thailand? Oh, I'm half Thai. So literally this interview became a 20-minute conversation about Thailand. And then he's like, oh, shit, I better go. And then you basically said, look, come back tomorrow, meet the team, we'll do a proper interview. Came back the next day, and Will, who's the business partner, basically his interview technique was they'd created a panel of experts who were going to help shops launch, with a bit of credibility to say, well, we will help judge the best advertising work. And there was these people from, 10 different companies in the industry. And Will said, do you know any of these businesses, any of these people, what they do? And I kind of looked at the list and I was like absolutely clueless. And I went, Saatchi & Saatchi, I've heard of, that's a bank, isn't it? So they were like, okay, you're not going to get the job because you know nothing about the business, but Guy really likes you. So look, you can be our intern. We'll give you 50 quid a week in cash. Take it or leave it. Help us get the first program, video off the ground. Your choice. And I thought, well, at that stage, I was literally getting rejection letters from, jobs every week and so on. And I thought, well, sod it, So I got subsidized by my student girlfriend and my dad. And worked on it for 50 quid a week. And then, long story short, became editor ultimately, So it's like sometimes you have to, serendipity, weird things happen. It's not always going to be from an aptitude test on a McKinsey website, So.
What a wonderful story and journey, Paul. How incredible. Honestly, and like you say, right, from those humble moments and those serendipitous moments to then actually taking you and using that to your advantage. And actually, I'm sure, you've skipped a long way between intern to editor. Yeah. But I'm sure those moments, about proving yourself and once you had that opportunity, grabbing it with both hands.
Yeah.
Any takeaways in that sense?
Yeah, I think because the bit that I missed out is probably, the most important bit from a young person's point of view coming into the industry. And that's, I was paid a month on, a month off, a month on, a month off, but literally it was £50 a week. And then it got to £100 a week. And I couldn't survive. And in the months off, I was doing things like, going back to this market research agency and being a mystery shopper for the post office, which was so excruciating because if you phone the post office in Aberdeen pretending to be a mystery shopper and you've got an English accent, they know that you're a mystery shopper. So it was all futile. So anyway, but one of the things I did, I worked for an agency, a runner agency. So I'd be a runner on commercial shoots and music videos and so on. And there was this time where I was doing a Japanese toy commercial in Wimbledon, this beautiful house in Wimbledon. And because it was set in England and it was a Japanese ad, it had to be raining because it rains in England all the time. And they was basically filming this little animatronic doll toy thing. And the script had these two little kids in an attic in this beautiful house. And because it was raining, the day that we were shooting, it wasn't raining. So my job was literally to sit on the patio of this expensive house in Wimbledon and turn the tap on and off from the garden tap, which then created the rain outside the window. So it was literally this little production guy going, rain off, and I thought, I sat there for about 6 hours freezing my back. And I thought, I'm halfway through a master's degree, I've got half a job, I'm freezing cold, I'm getting paid, whatever it was, £40 for the day or whatever. There has to be more to life than this. So I sort of took the decision to kind of walk away from shots, even though I loved it. And said, I can't function financially and there just has to be more to life. So I took a job, full-time job as a runner at a production company. that was run by this woman that used to work for Ridley Scott. So she's like proper hardcore, old school. This is when commercials, there's only like 4 channels on telly, and commercials were very much part of the cultural conversation. And I was there for 11 months, and it was the best thing that happened to me, because they used to turn around commercials very quickly, but she had really exacting standards. I remember getting absolutely berated for spelling restaurant wrong on a call sheet. You know, so little tiny attention to detail things. But when I'd sort of said to Shots, look, you know, if you can take me back, love to come back, you know, but full time, I can't, you know. So literally 11 months later, they're like, right, okay, we've now generated enough income, you know, the original research is gonna go, so we want you to sort of come and plug in. And my first week back, Will was like, what the hell's happened to you? It's like your work ethic, like your energy levels, you're like, you're you know, you're just, the way that you work is so different. And I think because I'd suddenly gone into this very, you know, like high intensity, very professional, quick turnaround, you know, sort of thing. So it's that sense of just like try and get as many experiences, and don't think that, you know, if you get into one funnel, you know, you can't jump into another and whatever. So yeah, I think that was a really valuable lesson for me, you know, was suddenly having this fantastic work ethic. And yeah, and it took me back to Shots. And as I say, eventually I became sort of editor at 26, I think I was. So, you know.
It's like,
wow, that sounds like it was quite a transformative year. I'm going to change gears a little bit. So TED Talk, over 1 million views, alternative currencies. Tell everyone what it's about.
Yes, that was a weird experience, right? So we had this kind of relationship with the commercial side of TED, because obviously, you know, TED, this is one of those things about advertising, is that advertising really does fuel the world. Like, people look at TED as this big, you know, kind of symbolic, almost like slightly hippie, game-changing, world-changing, you know, sort of almost like a religious cult thing, but it is powered by sponsorship. You know, without the brands to fuel the bandwidth that everyone taps into to watch the videos and so on, it wouldn't exist. So Contagious had this relationship with the commercial team where they would access our content to try and get leads and ideas and a sense of where the industry was going and who they should be talking to commercially. And then in exchange, I got a pass to go to TED. And I'd done a couple of talks to them for their sort of business events. And then they have this program where, you know, the big conference, but then they realized, so this is for the TED Global conference that they did in Edinburgh. And they realized that all these people will come into the city to be part of the TED experience, but they're all there kind of like the day before. So TED being TED, they're really kind of like, you know, sort of innovative. So they have this thing where they take a smaller space. So this was like a playhouse theatre in Edinburgh, and they invite audience members to submit talk ideas, or they will invite people in their universe to come and do talks. And they basically said, oh, do you want to pitch? You know, we've seen you talk and whatever, so pitch us some ideas. And we pitched some ideas. I was hoping they would go for the Brander's Barry White idea, where we were sort of talking about what brands were doing around Valentine's Day to create experience, you know, and it was a very flippant, funny sort of talk. But at the time, one of the other things that I'd sort of pitched, because it was an article that we'd written, was around branded currency, because that's when Bitcoin had literally just launched. It was this mysterious thing. And it was something that 2 of our strategists from the advisory side of Contagious had written this article about. Look, you know, if the natural extension of where digital currency is going, if digital currency is democratic, it relies on trust and transparency and a blockchain, there's no reason why ultimately a brand couldn't create a form of currency. Because we were sort of thinking the logical extension of a brand, say, like, you know, the example we used was Patagonia. You know, you've got this really fantastic brand that's rooted in sustainability. It's like its organizing principle now is to basically just save the planet, essentially. And we're thinking, like, if you buy into a brand like that as a consumer, it's very complex. Like, your choices, like whatever you buy, somehow you're going to find a fault with it. You know, it's going to have something in its supply chain, or where, you know, it invests. There's always a sort of like a negative, no matter what you buy. Whereas if you could look at something like Patagonia, they could say, right, okay, we have assessed all these different companies in these categories. So like in the beverages category, if you choose this brand, their sustainability policies are great, their environmental impact is very low, you know, they are the best, the most sustainable soda brand. And the same for cars or whatever. And therefore, if you buy using the Patagonia shilling that we've created, you might get a discount, but also you'll know you're making a very virtuous and you know, kind of relevant, safe purchase type thing. So that was where it started. And then we started looking at the currency in that context. If you can digitize currency, then currency doesn't have to be money. So we were looking at how Nike were using sweat as a currency. They had this thing where if you could, when they did develop their fuel band, it was very innovative at the time, which became like the Apple Watch essentially. But it was like you could prove that you'd done certain activities. And they had this thing where there's vending machines in New York as a sort of test around this idea of sweat as a currency. Whereas if you could prove you'd done things, your fuel band would interact with the vending machine, and you'd be able to get a pair of socks or a t-shirt or whatever. But if you hadn't done any exercise, you hadn't sweated, you were not, even if you tried to shove $100 bill into this machine, you were getting nothing because it was the sweat that was the currency. So
it sounds like the innovative version of bartering or something.
Yeah. What's weird about the TED experience is that they said, okay, so you come and you do this thing, and it's quite scary, but you thought, well, at least it's not the main conference. It's fine. Like, so if I mess up or, it's only a small show. But then you have to go through the same process that they put everybody through. So they rigorously will vet your script. You have all these meetings with them to like argue about the content, to get it down to the right time. So they literally micromanage in a good way, like serve as editors of your content. And then you turn up on the day, you have to sign all these contracts. They film it with the red circle, the TED thing, and whatever. And then, it was a wonderful experience, really nervous and all the rest of it, but fantastic experience. And then you think nothing of it. And then literally about 2 months later, I got this email going, congratulations, your talk's been selected. It's going to be on literally TED.com at this time. Please be around to deal with the comments. And I was on holiday in France at the time when it came live. And what you aren't prepared for is the commentary that comes with TED, because you get all kinds of people globally with all sorts of opinions. And I just got absolutely eviscerated within the first 10 minutes because I did say at the beginning, it's like, trust me, I work in advertising type thing, try and break the ice. But I think because I'd mentioned advertising, people were saying like, he knows nothing about finance, he works in advertising's evil and whatever. And they basically just tried to dismantle the sort of economic argument of what I was trying to say. And but then gradually you'll get people that come in and start defending your position, or then you've got to try and defend your position. So it was like this really quite scary experience. But because we talked about Bitcoin, I think that explains the 1.4 million views that we've had since, because it's right in at the time, it was right in the zeitgeist. So, which is a thing about advertising, something we could talk about. I think that advertising just as a business, it's a fascinating place to be, because you have to be aware of everything on that sort of cultural canvas that we all, want to paint on. But equally, you've got to be aware of finance and business and all these sort of trends, and, just literally be aware of everything. So because Contagious was in that epicenter, we picked up on this weird thing called Bitcoin as it was breaking. My big mistake was not investing. I didn't quite understand how to invest. And so if I'd had 1,000 Bitcoins, can you imagine? I'd be talking to you from my yacht in the Bahamas right now.
Well, certainly if you did it back in that time, perhaps, Paul, but yes. Certainly ups and downs through that journey, in the last couple of years on that front. But when researching for this conversation, I came across a talk of yours. I think it was in Greece, where you talked about the role of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And, you were talking about both sides of the coin, and then presenting your perspective on purposefulness of brands.
Yes.
And of course, Patagonia, as you alluded to, is probably one of the most quintessential ones that are shining lights for that. But I'd love to get your take today, maybe an updated perspective on how you see purpose in the context of brands, whether it does work from a consumer perspective, and how organizations can galvanize around the concept of purpose.
Yeah, I think I'm a sort of a big advocate of purpose. It gets a huge amount of stick and bad rap, and I think sometimes that's to do with how it's interpreted. I think people have got a sort of misperception. So I think when we look at it, and this is something that we sort of explored in the book, it was literally chapter 1 of the Contagious Commandments book, was we don't try to talk about purpose as such, because it has become diluted and it's almost got this sort of negative connotation. It's what we try and root it in is it's organizing principle. So Patagonia works because it's got a really, really strong organizing principle, which has now evolved into we are in business to save our home planet. So everything they do is all around that. So the investments they make, the products they make, and even the trust that they've now put into play. They also did loads of startups as well. They had a venture fund where they would invest in what they thought was sustainable ideas. So I think if you sort of take it back to organizing principle, then that informs everything that you do. So I think another example I talked about in the that was the WFA talk that I did in Greece for their conference, and IKEA I think was another example, and I love that one because their organizing principle, and it's something that as a brand they rediscovered when they'd lost a bit of momentum and people were kind of falling out of love with IKEA. They literally did that classic thing of going back through the archives, trying to reset, and came across this wonderful piece of yellowed paper from the 1970s that the founder had got and it was his organizing principle, and it was all that thing about creating better everyday design for everyday people. So they took that, and it's something that you basically, it's like the tent pole that you rally around. It's the thing that defines everything you do as a business and how you recruit and so on. But the strength of a good organizing principle, it means that something like IKEA, they could still do traditional advertising. So if you remember a few years ago, they had these ads with dinosaurs singing grime tracks, really funny, provocative, irreverent kind of advertising, 30-second ads, print ads, whatever. But at the same time, because they've got this, because that was promoting their fantastic, kind of designs they do for people to buy for their homes type thing. But because the principle is around like better everyday design for everyday people, they could also do at the same time things like what would we would describe as industry as their purpose-driven campaigns, whereas all about refugees. That's they basically invested where on a local level they would take in refugees from the countries that they operated in and give them jobs and give them language training and so on. But then equally, when it came to the better everyday design principle, they designed the best refugee shelters in the world. So rather than being these plastic shitty, kind of tents, they would design really effective, easily, kind of created shelters and so on. So for me, that's where you get like purpose has power, because it's something that it links directly back to the brand and its principle, but it's doing something of tangible value.
Yeah.
And to me, that is where purpose really kind of sings, where you've got a justification for doing it. And I think Unilever have been on a really interesting journey where, they were talking about purpose-driven brands actually generate more income and so on. And I think that, yes, but not every brand needs to be defined by a world-changing, socially active purpose. I think you just need to be kind of honest about that and just focus on the ones that do. So that's why Dove, I think, has been really successful for them, because they hit on a friction point in society, which is all around toxic beauty ideals and so on. And they were right in the epicenter of that. And that gives them leverage to have the conversation. But where they've succeeded when it comes to purpose is they've committed over the long term. I think that's when it works best, where a brand will commit over the long term and they're prepared to take criticism, they're prepared to make some mistakes, they're prepared to go on a really kind of interesting journey, but also bring people into it. So they don't own the brand, they don't own the story. It's the consumers that buy their products are very much part of that. And that's taken them into looking at, academic studies around sort of the beauty ideal. They've done things like comedy. They've taken a stand against like TikTok, the filters and so on, where that sort of turn your back campaign they did last year. So that I'm a big advocate of purpose when it's done with the right motivation and it has a tangible impact. And there's a lot of criticism about it in the industry. People say, and I think that you can't just dismiss it because it feels like, it was a trend, and it's all become too worthy and so on. Because I think that brands have a responsibility, particularly now. It's like, something again that we explored in the book was around the idea of brands almost having the ability to act as NGOs in the right circumstances, because there's so many friction points, there's so many things wrong with society right now, either through lack of money or investment or governments that don't have the will or the wherewithal to do stuff. And I think people are looking for brands to fill some of the gaps sometimes because they trust them, they have a voice. Brands are lucky they're surrounded by amazing creative agencies and media agencies that come up with all sorts of solutions and and creates platforms and voices and so on. So yeah, I think if brands can do the right thing while never forgetting that they still can do the conventional advertising to actually sell their stuff and promote what they do, then it's fine. I'm all for purpose. There is a point to purpose. There you go. And that's
like that take on purpose. I've just joined a dot as well, Paul, which is Contagious as a magazine. I'm remembering the IKEA campaign about the book. Do you remember that, where they did a bit of a skit saying that their magazine, their brochure,
catalog,
is actually portraying it as a digital entity and all.
Exactly.
But there's some circularity there. Paul, time has whizzed by. So last question for this section is, you've been on you describe it as a circuitous route, but lots of success along the way. What would your advice be for people who are trying to figure it out for themselves?
I think it's that sense of just be open, be curious. I think that there's this sort of sense that you've got to be on a track that you can't deviate from. If you haven't decided what you want to do by the age of 21, then you're basically going to struggle type thing. So I think the advice is that also try and find a passion point. I think that to me is that I knew I wanted to do something that involved writing, and I think I'm sort of undiagnosed ADHD. I think my wife is a Senko, works in education, and she's basically identified me. So my brain is I jump around and so on. And I think that the advertising industry is fantastic for people that want different, a lot of variety and different experiences and stuff. So for me, it's that sense of curiosity, but also conversations, like talk to people. That's something that I sort of try and, sort of encourage my kids, is that everything's become so digital. So it's all about passively watching and reading and observing what people are saying. But it's like, if you can actually physically have a conversation with someone, so if you're young and you want to get into something, pick up the phone, say, can I come? Can I be an intern? Can I have a coffee? Can I take, can I talk to you about that thing that you wrote? Like, don't be afraid, because what you find is often that people in senior positions who you might be admiring from afar have been in the same seat as you. They've experienced the same thing as you, and they're usually quite happy. I think, to give you 10 minutes, give you a coffee, give you some advice, because they're quite flattered to a certain extent, because their days are so intensely focused on their job, which can be really stressful or demanding or whatever. And the idea of someone going, I really admire you, can I get your advice, or can I ask you something? It's actually quite a nice distraction. It's a nice diversion and makes you feel good. It's like sort of espresso mentorship. There you go.
There you go. That word comes up again, espresso. Great advice, Paul. And everyone could take a lot out of what you say there. What I'm going to do now is try and put a bow on this and take out some of the key themes. It's been a real pleasure to have you on, and not least to hear your story from a beleaguered Middlesbrough, where you found yourself with time on your hands, and that furthered your imagination and your joy of writing. And then I can't help but pass over the fact that the Joy division was in the mix there somewhere as well, shaping who you are. Lots of sliding doors and serendipity, but fascinating to go from a £50 a week intern to editor at 26. So maybe circuitous and serendipitous, but nonetheless, pretty good start. And then obviously through into Contagious, and you zigged when others zagged, maybe, and that counterintuitive approach to win the battle for attention. And obviously the 20 odd years that you've had at Contagious, which really is the signature of your career.
Yeah, thank you.
And then I'm fascinated to hear about the TED process. I didn't know this, and it's probably put me off for life, but what an interesting experience. And I think you said you got eviscerated, but isn't that the whole point of TED, to bring different ideas and challenge a bit? And to the naysayers, well, they sod them basically. Loved your take on purpose. I mean, almost a highly practical thing to become an organizing principle, to provide direction and momentum, and the great examples that you quoted, and brands as NGOs. I've never heard anybody say anything like that. So that was fresh thinking. And to your advice as well, and that comes through time and again from what you said. Find the passion point, be curious, put yourself out there, wait for 55 minutes for somebody not even to turn up, but then amazing things happen. And you mentioned ADHD at the very end. So I was at dinner last night with somebody and we were talking about it. There's a lot of neurodiversity in my family. It's a constant theme on our show. And of course, this is the time where Stephen Bartlett has very publicly announced his diagnosis. Yeah. And you can see the threads, you can see the way that your brain fires, and probably has been your underpinning superpower. So fabulous to have you on. congratulations again with the new role. That sounds awesome. Content officer for Lions, and so you'll be right at the heart of the throng for Cannes. So good luck for that.
Thank you.
And my overall sense, Paul, is that you those humble beginnings in Middlesbrough, beleaguered Middlesbrough, have stayed with you in terms of a sense of humility and place, and the antithesis of arrogance, and the love of the craft that you talk about with such passion. So, Paul, it's been tremendous to have you on, and I know it will be greatly appreciated by our audience. So, thank you again.
Thank you. I will say thank you for listening. I feel as though I've talked far too much, but I've really enjoyed the experience, and hopefully there's some little nuggets in there for people. I think my final thing would be just say, like, follow your gut. I think that's something I've always tried to do, is if you've got an emotional radar, then, it's usually right.
Brilliant. Thank you again, Paul.
Thank you.